Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, I'm going to be taking a deeper look into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, answering the question, why is it still so playable today? And today's focus is going to be on Greyhawk Adventures. So, this is part 13 of a 13-part series. So this is the last episode that will be on the hardcover books of the first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons system. Later on, I will go into some adventures, very specific adventures, ones in which I have either the PDFs for or eventually the hard copies for as time goes on. So that'll be the next series of first edition videos that I do. But without further ado, let's get to this here book. So, as I have been doing over these last couple of months, I have been filling up my library of first edition books. And so this was one of the final books that I needed to get. I switched the order in which I've done these videos. I switched to do the Dragonlance one last video. And that's because of what's going on in the news with Dragonlance, currently in gaming news. So I just flipped it just to, strike the iron while it's hot. But this would have been the number 12. Instead, it's number 13. So Greyhawk Adventures, and let me just pull this here from my collection, because I think it's important to make this distinction between the two. The Greyhawk box set came out in, I believe, 1983. And that's a second printing. So this is the second printing of it. So it came out in 83. This book came out in, I believe, 88. And I will double check that right now. So several years later, obviously, 88. So 5 years later. What this book here contains, different from this is kind of an overview of the setting. And so there is more information here about the geographic setting. I mean, there's some political setting information in here as well, as far as, and also it does mention the deities and demigods of Greyhawk here. But the rest of it is the world history and a timeline for that. And the timeline for that is very filled. It's very lengthy and it's filled up with a lot of events, but there's also very large gaps in between those events and easily places where a campaign can take place without actually interfering too much or going into too much detail about what's contained in here, because this is really a bare bones foundation for adventuring in the world of Greyhawk, whereas this book here goes into much more detail, and it is specifically designed for the more experienced players or DMs and higher level characters. So let's switch over to the actual PDF for this. But in the meantime, I do want to, while we have this up, so I just wanted to show off the book here that I picked up. And no, I did not pay $14.95 for it. I paid roughly like $30 for this, so it was still a good buy. And you can see the condition of it. It's really quite good. Other than the sticker here, and I'd probably do more damage removing this sticker than it just being left on there. Besides, I have no intention of selling these. I don't know what my children or my grandchildren will do with them once I pass away, but for the most part, I am expecting to just keep this on my bookshelf until the day that I die, and certainly have it as a reference for gameplay. although I'd probably rely on the PDF as well, just to keep this a little bit more pristine. So let's get to that PDF since I mentioned it. Please excuse my coughs. I'll try to keep them as controlled and limited as possible. So here we have the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Greyhawk Adventures, compatible with AD&D and the second edition AD&D game system. So this came out in 1988, the same year that second edition was also released. So you could use this for either of the two. And there wasn't vast differences between first edition and second edition anyway. So certainly easily compatible for either of the two editions. This is by James M. Ward. James Ward is actually very accessible on Facebook. He's involved and I wouldn't say like really frequently posts in some of the AD&D first edition or just old TSR communities there, but he is around and he'll occasionally answer a question if you have a specific question. So I recommend that you kind of do that. He's his wealth of knowledge is what you would expect from a legendary and legacy writer, author for Dungeons and Dragons back in its earliest days. So, I highly recommend that you reach out if you do have specific questions and pose it with him directly. He goes on, and I'm not going to focus too much on this very lengthy introduction. Just going to hit on this warning here. This book is designed for experienced campaigners. So he goes on to explain how this book here is not meant for your brand new DM and not meant for your brand new players. The challenges that are also included in this book are going to be a higher level anyway, and so it's a good transition to go from what you have in the box set of the World of Greyhawk and then move into this and start including some of the information that is here. And I'll go into some detail with some of those points as we go forward. Now, instead of just going through the table of contents, I'm going to actually go right to the content of this book. So deities and clerics of Greyhawk. So obviously there are Greyhawk deities that are very specific to Greyhawk. And then clerics for each of the deities will have some specific identifiers, whether it be, and more so than just, their holy symbols are different. They will have some different capabilities unique to being a cleric of those deities. And I'll just point out a few of the, the more well-known ones. So Bokhab is a greater deity, and he resides on the concordant opposition. He's a neutral deity. Arcane knowledge is his primary domain. His holy symbol is the eye in a star. His color is purple. So his clerics would be dressed in purple. And one of the additional spells his deities get is his clerics get is the Disc of Concordant Opposition. This spell is granted to clerics of Bokhab when they become eligible for 6th level spells. So very high level character here. It is a less powerful version of Bokhab's own Disc of Concordant Opposition. When it is cast, the cleric brings into being a disc which will blast most creatures into nothingness unless they resist magic. So you can see, very powerful spell. That's why it's such a high level spell. And here's an image of, I suppose it's Bokob. And I've seen other images of Bokob as well, so there might always be differences. I'm just going to focus on the major ones. And when I say major, I mean ones that we certainly used in our own campaigns, or I just get the sense they're fairly popular with players of first edition. St. Cuthbert is another one of those, very popular. Utilize them ourselves, especially clerics of St. Cuthbert were fairly common. Lawful good deity. You could have paladins of St. Cuthbert as well. Additional spell of beguiling. Known for carrying a cudgel. Although I don't know why they put this mace, unless it's, I guess, like a wooden mace or... Ilana is a lesser deity. I've played rangers that that followed her, and she was also, I believe, the feature of a Larry Elmore cover on Dragon Magazine, and it was really an iconic figure, or iconic, piece of art on the cover. Additional spell of stalk. Farlagon was another very popular one. Footsore is their cleric's level 4 spell. This specialized curse causes any journey of more than 1 league to become twice as long as normal. Excuse me. Encabulous, a major deity, evil deity. I don't recall us really using this deity very much. Additional spell is Plague, 4th level spell, so fairly high level spell for a cleric, or a cleric has to be around 7 or 8 or possibly 9 in order to have access to that, probably 8. Istis. Now, Eots is a fairly well-known deity, a demigod, so not a very powerful deity. However, the fact that Eots existed on the prime material plane made him somewhat unique amongst all of the Greyhawk deities, in that he actually ruled over a country in his name, and a major player in sowing discord and war across the regions that are adjacent to the country that bears his name as well. So he frequently came up in our adventuring and in our campaigns back in the early days of us playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So especially if you're playing in that region of whether it be the Shield Lands or Greyhawk City in itself, or just that surrounding area. He was a major player. We have Nero, which is another neutral evil deity. Fultus is a lawful good deity, and Fultus, one of my more recent campaigns that I was running in the Greyhawk setting, the cleric in the group was a follower of Fultus. And so, but we didn't utilize this book at the time, and I wish I had, because I would have been able to tell him that he would, upon achieving probably 8th level, he'd gain access to the additional spell of Sunburst, which is a 4th level clerical spell, and really quite powerful. Spells are be blinded for 2 to 12 segments. We'll go on. Some of these are like lesser, like I'm not very familiar with them as well. So now we get to the monsters of Greyhawk. Now, one other thing about the deities was that not all of the deities were included in here. Some are reprints or from the Worlds of Greyhawk setting, but some of the deities that were mentioned in the Dragon magazine never made it to the Greyhawk box set or the Greyhawk this particular book. So there are other Greyhawk deities that I have seen in the Dragon magazines, but they didn't exactly translate over to this here. So monsters unique to Greyhawk setting: Beastmen, Vampire Cactus, Camp Rats, Change Cats, Crystal Mist. Greyhawk Dragons, I think I've encountered, and they're fairly interesting. So Greyhawk Dragons love the companionship of humankind and prefer to live in cities. So that makes them somewhat unique. They are highly magical and intellectual. Although considerably smaller than many of its kin, the Greyhawk Dragon shares the strength and robustness typical of other dragons. Its scales are rich metallic gray, reminiscent of brushed steel, ranging to a darker hue. Their combat: at heart a peaceful creature, the Greyhawk Dragon avoids combat where it can. If conflict is inevitable, however, it fights with a great intelligence and lethality. I could definitely see you utilizing a Greyhawk Dragon as a quest giver in in any campaign that you were running. Grunge, I guess not the music, but grunge are highly territorial toad-like humanoids that dwell in swamps. Injundi. Some of these, like I'm not very familiar with, because 1987 was probably the last year that my gaming group was still active with tabletop gaming. We had kind of broken up and gone our separate ways 2 years after high school, and many of us were in college or the military at the time, so we just never got around to to getting this, and certainly not using it. And it's one of the reasons why I kind of debated whether or not to get this particular book, but the completionist in me got the better of me, and I said, you know what, I want all 13 books in my collection. sea sprites. We'll get through it. So there's a number of creatures unique to Greyhawk or introduced for the Greyhawk setting and probably find their way into future books. So here we have the Hall of Heroes. And now you're going to get some more detail into some of the high-level NPCs that your players, as being experienced campaigners, might actually come into contact with and have to deal with. So we have the Lord Mayor of the city of Greyhawk, which again could be very easily a quest giver. A constable of the Free City of Greyhawk, again potentially a quest giver. The Captain General of the City Watch. The Thieves Guild Master. So if you do have a thief in your group, he or she is certainly going to have at least some dealings with the Thieves Guild of the City of Greyhawk. The Assassin Guild Master. And same thing, if you do happen to have an assassin in your group, which I guess is a little bit rarer, but you may find yourself at odds with the Assassin's Guild for whatever reason, and so this is a potential adversary. Master of the Trade Union. Potential quest giver. Some really excellent art, interior art. Not a whole lot of interior art in these supplements. And I know I've mentioned it over and over again throughout this series, but it's another 130-page book, which seems to be the TSR standard for all supplements and the Beyond the Core 3 books. The Valley of the Mage, so another region of the world, and another series of very important NPCs for you to potentially encounter. Again, as quest givers or potential adversaries, depending on the nature of your campaign. We have the Scarlet Brotherhood. Monk level 16. Alesh Marin, a member of the First Order of the Scarlet of the Brotherhood. Only a monk level 6, so kind of weak in comparison. Your player characters are probably more powerful than that if you're utilizing this book by then. Karl of Ernst. The Duchy of Ernst is, so he's a Duke, 12th level Ranger, so fairly high level. You'll notice the hit points, 71 hit points doesn't seem like a lot. If you're into the more modern editions, there probably isn't very much. Hit points weren't as high in first edition. Damage dealing wasn't as high either, but it was still fairly high at higher levels, and so it was just overall a more dangerous game. Tang the Horrific, Prince of the Clan, Dry Steppes. Fighter level 12. I'm just going to shift here for a moment and shake out this. Sorry about that. Let's see. I found that a little sip of rum takes care of asthma and an allergy cough. Juliana Mortidos, a cleric of the Horn Society. So in my current campaign, the Horn Society plays a significant role since my player characters in my group are all, either fighters or ranger, paladin, cleric, all in the service of the Shieldlands. And so this is their adversary. And so I can see incorporating this information into their overall story. So magic spells. So there are, a number of wizards who are very well known in the lore of Dungeons and Dragons. All right. So these wizards have, they were mostly player characters of luminaries and old school D&D. So whether it be Ernie Gygax's character or Luke Gygax's character or Bloom or whether it be Bruce Hurd or any of those individuals and others as well. I'm leaving out, and I don't have the specific list. I should have had that done ahead of time, but these were the player characters that were being used within Gary Gygax's own, gaming group, going through those early campaigns, whether it be the Blackmoor or then early Greyhawk campaigns. And so these powerful wizards developed a number of spells that you see in the player's handbook, but also here you have some others that are additional spells. So they're not found in the player's handbook, or I think very few of them are. So these are all additional. And so we have Bigby and a series of spells that Bigby had created. We have after Bigby, we go to Drumages. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. So Dwarmage, then we go to Mordenkainen, which is probably, next to Bigby, is probably one of the more well-known magic users in Dungeons & Dragons lore. Nistel. Odaluk. I believe we should have Otto coming up. Yeah, Otto. Rary, which I've never actually heard that name before, so that's a new one for me. I'm surprised MILF doesn't have any additional spells in here too, but perhaps the character just wasn't as prolific in creating spells as some of these. Tensor, so Tensor's Floating Disc is a very common spell for magic users to take. Especially good at hauling treasure out. So the magic items section. Magic items are in this book are regional based. So that either means that the magic item was created there, or that the magic item was can be more easily found there. All right, and the magic items have a designation next to them as to what class it's either usable by or best suited for. So we have the Adumfort of Ring of Leadership, only usable by fighters. You have the Luck Ring of the Wild Coast, which is usable by any, so it's not designated. It's basically a gambling ring. Allows you to adjust the rolls on dice rolls as much as, 1, 2, or 3 or more points above or beyond the roll that you were hoping for. The Cursed Ring of the Great Kingdom, the Ring of the Parmage. Same thing with rods, staves, and wands. So you have a variety of them that could be found in particular regions, whether it was originally created there or more easily found there. And these can all become, they're all very powerful, potentially artifacts, and so all become a potential adventure hook. Same thing with amulets and so on, miscellaneous magic items. And speaking of adventure hooks, we then will keep on scrolling until we get to the next section. We're still into magic items. There's quite a lot. There's a brief section that gives you a little bit more of a geography lesson on Orith. And so just a little bit more information about these major regions, like climate type regions of the world. Not so much the actual political. I mean, they talk about political actions that took place, but they're not the city states or the nation states, or even the vast territories of various barbaric tribes or anything like that. They're talking more in relation to geographic regions and kind of history of them. So each section has notes for the dungeon master, giving them ideas about how to run adventures there. And then we will come to the last section, which I believe is adventures. So these are all fairly short adventures. In this final chapter, you will find adventure. Actually, several adventures. Some showcase magic items, non-player characters, monsters, and such. They're all fairly short. Two or possibly 3 pages long. Diver Down, The Lair, The Conspiracy, The Atoll, The Bow, Sea Spirits, Sprites, Sea Sprites. And then a conclusion. So that one was a fairly longer. And so on. So they give you a number of short adventures. And then it has a section here on zero level characters. The thing I like about zero level characters, and I'll actually switch views because I'm going to leave it off here anyway. The thing I like about zero level characters is that it helps the players develop a more connective background for their characters. So I think they grow a greater attachment to and a better understanding of their own characters when they played them as zero level or even adolescent characters, and then Obviously, the DM is not going to kill them off in their potentially fairly minor or rites of passage type adventures. So they should know that the expectation is the outcome of their early adventures as a child or an adolescent shouldn't result in their death, but it should result in them having a more fleshed out background and understanding of their character by the time that they do become first level. So I think there's a greater benefit to it than someone just writing up a 3 or 4 page background story for their character, kind of disconnected from actually playing it. So that's something that I encourage you as a DM to utilize with your players, especially new players, because you get them into the a sense of playing a character without having so many abilities that they have to really keep track of, and and just kind of coax them into the experience of potentially having some failure, but none of it catastrophic, and then they become first level, and then they move forward with the rest of their adventures as a full-fledged, adventurer first level, with all of the world's challenges and dangers, included. So I do think that there's a great benefit in playing zero level characters and doing that as part of your zero session, or potentially a very first session, and then you'll get into the regular campaign that you're running. So once again, I think a really useful book. Obviously, especially if you're playing in the world of Greyhawk, but even if you're not, there are some really good content in here that you can utilize, in other campaigns and in other settings as well. So I highly recommend it. I'm glad I picked it up, and this really ends the 13-part series. And to just finally wrap up, why is this still so playable? The thing about first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is that it really empowers the DM and the players to play the game as they like it, to use parts of it that they wish to discard parts that they don't. If you have these 13 books in your collection and you started a brand new group of players, and you know that you're going to play for a number of years together, this system has it all. You don't even have to buy adventure modules. Just utilize these books here, or even a portion of these books here, and you could literally play for decades. And one of the reasons why I asked the question, why is this still so playable, is that when I look into communities on Facebook that have 10,000 members, and it's dedicated to old TSR games or first edition, second edition, advanced Dungeons and Dragons, some of them private groups around half that size, but I think the largest is around 13,000. I know that there's people that are in, 4 or 5 different groups, so it's probably not 13,000 unique to just that site, that they're also populating other communities as well. But there's clearly at least one community there that has 13,000 unique players who are still playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition or old school TSR D&D games. And I think it's still so playable because it has that longevity in its writing, and its philosophy and vision for what is role playing, and so you had no end story. There's no end game in RPGs, tabletop RPGs. There's no end game content. There's just, you play your characters, and they either die or you decide, well, they're going to become the NPC of the world, and I'm going to pick up again with a new character and a new story, and build up from there once again. So that's the true beauty of tabletop role playing games in general. But specifically, I think with first edition is that, and this might just be nostalgia. Talking from nostalgia on my own behalf, but it just feels like you're playing in a fantasy world. You're playing a character that is going to be demanded upon them to do extraordinary things, and it's just high adventure. It just strikes me as being more dangerous than some other games as well. So it's less forgiving in that sense, especially at lower levels. And so that's one thing to be concerned about. But there's just so much content crammed into every 130-page book that, and again, you don't have to use it all. Actually, you probably shouldn't use it all. But there is just so much there that you can literally play this game for decades if you haven't started playing it. Already you can know that if you get all of the AD&D, core books, you have decades worth of playing, in your possession there. And so that's what I think is really great about this. Not that second edition or third edition or fourth or fifth can't do the same thing. I just think that first edition does it a little bit better overall. I know a lot of people say, well, second edition is a much better, mechanically better game than first edition, whether it be the way it's written or formatted or such, whether it's laid out or it just makes more sense. And then I've heard the opposite is that this is truly the best edition. So it's really to your own personal taste as well. But I really recommend that you give first edition or older editions of Dungeons and Dragons a try if you haven't played them already. And just be prepared that there will be differences. There'll be greater challenge the earlier that you go, and there's a certain feel that these games have over some of the other editions as well. So just be on the lookout for that. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this series of videos. And if you haven't had a chance, please go on back and watch the series. I think it comes out to almost like 12 or 13 hours of total video time, maybe slightly less, but I really did try to do each of the books a certain amount of justice that I could in a 40 to 50 minute or so video for each. I could probably spend 2 hours on every book if I really wanted to cover every single minute detail of it. But I hope you enjoyed this. Please give it a thumbs up if you're inclined. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. The channel is on the verge of, or might have just broken the 1,000 mark, and I'm really excited about that. But I'm just waiting for the official word, and hopefully the channel continues to grow. And I will certainly continue delivering content that you all have expressed that you want to see as well. So if you have anything to leave in the comments, especially along those lines as well, if you have something that you want me to take a look at, please leave a comment in the section there. I will get around to it. The next series for AD&D First Edition that I was planning on doing and probably will do to a certain extent is to start taking a look at some of the modules. I don't have very many in PDF. I'm waiting to get a few hard copies, and so I will spend some time with the earlier edition modules and do a slightly different format than this, because I don't want to give out any spoilers with modules, but I do want to talk about, well, this is where it's set, and this is kind of the the overall theme of the adventure without giving away any of the major details. So that will be an upcoming series very soon. So once again, thanks for joining, and I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon. You'll have a great rest of the afternoon. Take care.